everyone, welcome back to Life Unpotted. This is Sophie here. Thank you for joining us for another episode. I am feeling like I'm really trying to honor where I'm at. I'm trying to honor this season of my life that feels different than normal. It feels a little more intense than normal. It feels a little more chaotic, a little more uncertain, a little more sad, honestly. It feels like I'm in touch with myself, but that feeling isn't one that I'm used to. It's uncomfortable to be feeling these things all the time. And I guess that's what I want to just open this up with, is setting an intention to honor where you're at. I think a lot of the times it's easy for us to constantly be fighting against ourselves, fighting against where we're at in life, fighting against the circumstances that we're in, and just taking a moment to pause and to remind yourself it's okay. Whatever you're going through, wherever you're at, it's okay. It's only when we start resisting ourselves, and I noticed this for me that yesterday, I've been feeling hurt, and all of a sudden I saw that sadness turn into anger, and I started getting mad, and I became aware of it. But it's just a recognition that when we don't give ourselves love, when we don't remain open, when we don't honor how we're feeling, we run the risk of getting mad, hurting people in our life, projecting it onto people in our lives. And that's not a great place to be in, because it comes with consequences. It comes with impact. Ultimately, everything that we do comes with a consequence in one way or the other. So it's a matter of just checking in with yourself, and yeah, that's where I'm at.
I can tell this is going to be like an emotionally grounded episode because I'm at a place where I've had excessive anxiety the past couple of weeks, just amidst change and all this that's still happening very much, feeling weirdly homesick for New York, even though I have no desire to be there, being homesick for comfort, being homesick for safety and simplicity, and recognizing that's just not where my life is at right now. I didn't have the option for my life to be comfortable and simple because it was no longer filling my cup. It was no longer making me happy. So that pushed me to be where I am now. And it's interesting because now where I'm at here is I know I have to keep putting one foot in front of the other, of figuring out what is next, and what is next. But I'm still nostalgic and reminiscent of the past, even though those times were not, like you said, connected to myself in a lot of ways. Other seasons of my life, the last 5-6 years, it was very simple for me. And I'm accepting that is just not where I'm at. And simplicity doesn't always mean happiness. Simplicity doesn't always mean following the direction that your heart wants you to go in. So I feel pretty grounded right now. I am not trying to be anything. I'm not trying to go anywhere. I'm just accepting kind of the relief of the groundedness that comes over your body sometimes after extreme states of anxiety, of realizing I can just let go of everything. And that's just where I'm at right now. So I'm curious to see where we go with the episode.
Well, it's interesting because it's almost like that relief is what comes when we stop running from ourselves. When we stop running from ourselves. I wonder if you told me a few years ago that I was running from myself, I don't know if I would understand what that meant, because I was just so disconnected. I didn't know. I didn't have self-awareness. I didn't have emotional awareness. I didn't know that I was running. And it reminds me of the poem you wrote, Daisy, that we posted on our Substack. Daisy's been writing a lot of poetry, and it's been really awesome to see you write it because it's just flowing out. It's just happening. And you were writing just about that feeling of constantly spending your whole life running. And a lot of times we don't realize we're running. We're waking up in the morning, we're going to work, we're coming home, we're going out to dinner, we're busy. Life is busy. Life is hard. I think I had a recognition today after therapy that I think we're all trying to find somebody to tell us that life is not going to be hard. We're looking for something some level of assurance to remind us that, oh, this is not the case. It's not true that we're going to have to grieve throughout our life. It's not true that people around us will pass away. It's not true that life is uncertain, that we're constantly getting older, that change is constantly happening. And I think it's really scary to recognize all that. But I think while we may not ever be able to find that concrete answer of saying, oh, you could skip all of that, you can avoid that, that's not true, don't worry, life isn't hard. But we can realize we're not alone. We can remember that we are all going through this. All of us. Every single human being alive will naturally in their life be born and then die. That is the natural course of a human life, right? It's what happens in between that, right? It might look different from person to person in terms of our external experience, but the emotions we go through are the same in the sense we all grieve, we all feel sadness, we all feel hopelessness, we all feel jealousy, anger, all of these feelings. And I never knew anyone else felt that way. Because honestly, I didn't even know I felt those feelings. So I think a shift happens when we're going through things, when we're processing feelings, when we're feeling emotions, when we can remember that we're not alone. And it's interesting, like something happens, and I'm curious, Daisy, like what is your experience for you when you remember or when you hear from somebody that they're also going through it? What does that do for you?
Well, it makes you feel less alone is, I think, the obvious answer, and the most prominent answer is that you feel connected and bonded through something that maybe you never expected to be connected and bonded through, because it is the realest thing. And it's so easy to find people to connect over things that are shallow, that aren't deep. And it can be an isolating experience to accept the fact of life. And it can be very difficult. So when you are able to find people who are going through the same thing, and more people are going through it than lead on to be, is kind of my instinct. It's something that a lot of people maybe don't want to be vulnerable in that place, especially when they're not in a curated space. So I think when you are in a curated space, it's much more easy to open up. And the benefit is so high because when you open up, it's almost guaranteed that someone else will open up and you'll see that you aren't alone in it. And it's funny because we're talking about like the essence of life, of how it's hard to connect over the essence of life, because day to day we don't see others who are just openly talking about the essence of life. And it's actually the truest thing that there is. So we can all experience it, we can all feel it, and we all do have experience with it. It's just a matter if we are aware of that or not. So I think it's a matter of finding people who are aware of it, or people who are made aware of it by you expressing where you're at with it. I mean, I think this is what the basis of family is found on. When you're in an early family, you don't have to say anything. You just feel that love. And maybe that's a little bit different than the essence of life, but is it? It's kind of an early essence of it that doesn't have the baggage of life because it's so early and it's so fresh, and we're able to experience it. Like with children, they're the essence of life and they don't yet have the baggage of things that have brought them down through life, and they are closer tapped into that essence of life. So I think that, you know, having a family early on, it really does bring that out in that essence of community and love and having that. But that's not the only way. Like, it's finding just those intentional spaces to feel with other people. And that can be, you know, anything from a workout class to a yoga class to a meditation class. There's so many things out there. And it's so important to find these things because that's what gives our life purpose, I think.
Yeah, and I think it can be easy to get caught up in life is hard, life is all these things, and it's going back to the fact that like life being hard, going through feelings of sadness, going through feelings of feeling all these emotions is what informs our ability to feel happy and joy and so connected. And I reflect on the past few years of facing very uncomfortable feelings and learning to sit with them. And I also look on the past few years, I mean, the past 2 years really, I see a lot of joy. I see a lot of love. And it's reminding ourselves that, like, love, what we all want in this life is to feel love. That's all we all want. It is making me really remember the reality of you are born into this world and you have this blank slate, this blank canvas for up until the point in which someone starts putting dark paint on your canvas and they start scratching away on your canvas. And you're so young that you think that that darkness is life. You think that your canvas can't change. And we go through life not even realizing that our canvas has been darkened. We don't even realize because we forget what it's like to feel the reds and the blue and the orange and the green and the purple. We forget what it feels like. And it's interesting opening up this conversation with feeling like, yeah, you know, we've been sad, we've been feeling, but that can sometimes have a negative connotation. And I think it's important to recognize that this is because we're processing. This is because we're healing. This is because we're feeling stuff that maybe normally I wouldn't feel. And it's that gives you ability to recognize that there's a lot more to your canvas, to the canvas of life, than just the darkness. There's so much love. And I remember being like at my law firm when I first started working, and I remember this intense anxiety I would feel of just thinking about the future and just thinking like, oh my God, I'm so anxious because it will always just be this. It will always just be this. And my mind felt so trapped because all I could imagine was suffering. All I could imagine was having to work really, really hard and having to pay bills. And upon reflection, I realized that a lot of the things that we think are going to be really hard may actually end up being really hard, but we forget how capable we are. We forget how resilient we are. We forget what we are able to go through. So yeah, I'm just, if there's anyone out there who's in that place of, you know, constant darkness or constant just feeling like they don't see a way out, they don't know how their life can be different, just want to take a moment to reflect that I have been there and I have seen the change. I have seen the fact that we are constantly moving forward, that no emotion lasts forever, no feeling lasts forever. And it may take time to learn how to paint that canvas back to the original colors, but we all have the capacity to do so.
That made me think about just how there's this classic picture. I'm sure we've seen it in school or on Twitter back in the day. And it's basically someone who has a sledgehammer and they're trying to find the other side. There's a wall up and they're trying to get to the other side. And they're sledging through pounds and pounds and pounds of rocks. And they give up because their thoughts are like, oh, you know, you're never going to get there. And all it took was one more sledge swing for them to get to the other side. And as cliche as it is, when we look at these like really cliche things, I think there's often a meaning behind them that we can only see if we are allowing ourselves to kind of be vulnerable. And I look at that as a metaphor for life. When you aren't sure every day when you wake up about where your life is going, you're not sure of anything, but it's like you still wake up, you don't listen to those thoughts, and you still keep pushing on. You still keep going. You still keep climbing. And I think when you have enough perspective in life, it's really hard to see, I think, early on when you don't have a lot of perspective. But even in those instances when it's really difficult to just keep going, even on the days you wake up and you say, I don't know what it is that I'm doing, whether that is a change you're making, whether it is the changes you've made, whether it's the life that you're living. If you don't know, if you wake up and you say, I don't know what my life is anymore, You just keep moving forward. And that just means reevaluating. That means keep creating, keep on creating, keep on creating, keep on making. Never give up for the things that make you feel excited and on fire in a way with passion. It's to keep on moving to build something that you can't see. You can't see that it's there. And I really think that that is the essence of life. If we're going back to this essence of life conversation, I think that will to keep moving forward. And as human beings, that can be extremely difficult because we have this brain that creates all these thoughts and tries to solve all these problems. When we have one concern or one emotion, our brain gets involved and says, you shouldn't podcast anymore. You shouldn't write anymore. You should just go get a job. What are you doing? You're running out of money. You don't have enough. Like, it's really difficult to keep on going when we have that kind of chatter in our brain. Whereas when we're a tree, it knows what to do to keep on growing. It knows what to do to keep on surviving, being alive. It's inherently there. So you think it's not inherently there for us humans? It is. It's just covered up by this massive veil of our mind that gets in the way. So that's where I think it's like bringing it back to the community aspect, even just sharing these concerns with anyone in the same space who is going through a similar thing. Like, we're all the same thing. We're all experiencing life. Even if someone's not experiencing life in the exact way you are, that essence of life is always the connective tissue for us to be with others, for us to feel seen, and a motivation to keep going because you're not alone. And it's a reminder that what you're doing is okay because that's what you want to keep on doing. And it's easy to try to find certainty. It's easy to want to find a guarantee of how your life is going to look every day. But I also know the flip side of that guarantee of knowing what your life is going to look like every day is that it isn't always as great as it may seem when you're on the flip side of that, when you don't know what every day is going to be. You don't know what's going to be in 10 days. You don't know what's going to be in a month. So these are both extremes. So the pendulum's always going to swing. When you're in one extreme pendulum swing, you're going to reminisce on the past pendulum swing. And that's okay, but that, remember, is just your mind. You were in an experience in the past, and just because you're reminiscent of something in the past and you had good times with that experience in the past, it does not mean that this version of you, this season of your life that you're in right now, it doesn't mean that that's what you need right now to keep moving forward, to keep fulfilling yourself, to keep on looking for what it is that you're looking for. And when I say looking, that's probably the mind saying you're looking for something, you're looking for something. This moment's not enough, you're not happy. But I think the reality of it is that it's always going to be difficult. Life is always going to be difficult. It's just going to have less difficult problems. And I think at your core, you know what it is that you are wanting to do. And you know if it's not what you're wanting to do now. And of course, if that's the case, it's going to come with repercussions. It's going to come with things that aren't things that you might want. The things we want always come with things that we didn't expect. But that's the uncertainty aspect. That's the uncertainty component that is kind of what keeps us feeling alive. I think, again, the essence of life is uncertainty. So when we rid our life of the essence of life, of uncertainty, we start to, I don't want to say our world gets small, but I think our world feels smaller. There's less things that we are able to see or experience when we aren't welcoming life in its full form.
I'm definitely having a lot of thoughts right now because, all right, hear me out real quick. So we have to recognize that two things can be true at once. We can recognize that life is really hard. We can recognize that life is painful, that we're going to go through periods of sadness and depression and intense pain. But there comes a point where the mind starts creating the narrative and we start feeding it and victim mindset comes in of feeling bad for yourself. And just hearing you talk about kind of like the paralleled life for us of in the past before we took this huge risk and now being over here where we took the risk, there's a common denominator of the mind wanting something else. You know, you look at us when we're at the job and we want something else. We want the other life. We glamorize moving to Austin, and moving to Austin is going to be amazing and we're going to feel great when we move, right? And then you fast forward to us being here and we're like, oh, this is just as hard. This is harder because we're pursuing our dreams and we're pursuing our passions. But you see that pattern coming back of, I want something in the future. I want to know where my life's going. I don't like where I'm at now, so I want something different. And therefore, is a reflection on the old life to say, oh, was I happier there? And it's interesting, we see this happen, I think, throughout our whole life of it's the wanting mind of doing everything it can to avoid being here. And we can live our whole lives in that state, and we'll never find happiness. We'll never find fulfillment. And this goes back to the whole idea, I think, of what are our expectations in life? Do we expect to feel good all the time? Is it this whole thing of happiness we were sold that, you know, you'll feel good every morning, you'll wake up, you'll have your nice clothes on, you'll have coffee, and you'll feel, you know, the external world of feeling good? Like, you can't undermine how much our expectations play in, like, when you zoom out, right? Like, we're somehow existing on this planet. We're somehow born. Daisy didn't exist 28 years ago. Sophie didn't exist 30 years ago. But when we're born and we go through this life and we start going through the story of ourselves and we start believing the story of ourselves, and our mind starts taking over and it starts controlling us and it starts making us think all of these things, and we're not going to be happy. This is not good enough. I want more. I want more. I want more. That we start to take the game of life a little too seriously. We start to take it way too seriously because it's like we forget that there is a world where we weren't here. We almost start putting these extreme expectations on how we expect life should be. Where does that come from? Like, where does this expectation come from? Is that our relentless desire to always want to feel better? Is that our ancestors and tribal times and needing to build certain tribes to survive and being in a much more danger? Why do we expect life to be a certain way? Why do we expect life to not be hard? Why do we expect there to be a place where we arrive at? And it's making me think, just remembering of like, I've arrived already. I've arrived already. And maybe that answer isn't satisfactory because that means oh, I've arrived, but I'm sad. That's really what my life is. And I think a lot of that is the resistance that we experience to these feelings and this expectation, this idea that we've created that life would be otherwise. And that's why when we find out someone else is going through it, there's a relief. You feel less alone. So is a lot of the problem us thinking that everybody else out there is happier and everybody else out there is just getting up every day and enjoying life? What if we knew that every single person right now in this moment was feeling the exact way? Would that then free us to go, oh, I don't have to resist this because this is just what life is. This is life. There's no other way besides feeling these things. There's no way around it. We might think leaving the job will get us there. Moving might get us there. Having a family might get us there. But is this just it?
Well, there's no denying that whenever you're feeling things, I feel like, for more than a few seconds or more than a minute, like the mind has gotten a hold of you. Even me sitting here listening to you go through all this, I'm like working through it. I'm like, I don't want to believe it, but like, I guess I will.
Is it because it denies your suffering though? Like, I feel like...
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm fully agreeing with you.
Yeah, it's just funny.
Well, I was thinking when you said like, oh, I've arrived and I'm sad. But it's like, what if it's like, I've arrived and I'm sad? Like, what if it's like, oh... Right, I get to be doing this. This is like something that I'm allocated time to do. And okay, in a way that acknowledges I've arrived. Cool. And I'm sad. And then you're able to move on because emotions don't have to last longer than 60 or 90 seconds. So it's shifting it right there. That's a major shift of taking something where you're like, oh man, I'm sad. And it's being like, no, I'm sad. Like, great. That means I'm feeling. Acknowledging it and then being excited that you get to experience this because this is life.
It's almost like, like that's it. And I feel like it's funny, like our posture is changing from we came into episode, I'm like, hey guys, I'm really sad. And it was kind of like, you see the shift, like you're sitting up a little straighter now. It's almost like the mind, like it's always our mind. And this is when you go to the deeper level and it's like, yes, we're feeling feelings, but to what extent are you caught up in the story? To what extent are we now going down the my life is hard story? Life is hard. And I guess I was going down it when I started. And look, two things can be true at once. I'm not saying that we can't go through pain. We can't be suffering. We can't acknowledge that life is really hard. But we also have to remember, how much are we contributing to the story? How much are we getting caught up in the idea of ourselves when we zoom out and we go, we're on a planet. We were somehow born into a galaxy. And now I have all this expectation that my life should be a certain way. But was it guaranteed you were here? No. 1 in a trillion chance you're born. So what prevents us from fully immersing and experiencing the game of life, enjoying the game of life, where Alan Watts says, you're the bus driver who I'm processing a lot. And it's fascinating because there was definitely a part of me that did think, life would be easier when I leave my job. Life will be easier when I'm pursuing my passions. It's glamorized. It's the constant escaping of reality, that it doesn't matter what you're doing. This is it. You're going to be sad. You're going to be anxious. You're going to feel all these things. But when you let yourself feel it, like you're saying, it goes from that maybe a few moments of feeling it or a day of feeling it, and then you move on.
So this goes in line with what I was saying earlier of sometimes we wake up and we don't want to do something. We wake up and we question everything. Our mind is racing. Our thoughts are racing. They're telling us X, Y, and Z. And oftentimes the best way to get out of our thoughts is to continue taking action. So tagging on a second part of the essence of life is to just keep going even when you don't believe you can keep going. Is that the reality is when you don't believe you can keep going and you keep going, very shortly after you're going to hit a wall and it's going to say, keep going. And your brain's going to be like, oh yeah, I should keep going. I like this. This is exciting. This is why I do it. I'm re-inspired. I'm feeling good. That's why you keep going.
Right. You're like, oh, right. This is what it feels like to keep going, to not be resisting and to not be caught up in my mind, to not be thinking.
Yeah. And that's the point of life.
Thoughts are hell is what I keep coming back to. Like, there's a difference between feeling sad and thinking about being sad.
Yeah. And I would say it's like, if you are fully in your feels and you don't want to do anything, go to that yoga class, go on that walk, go on that run, go see that friend. Don't cancel your plans. Keep doing these things. You signed up for these things. You made plans with these things for a reason. And your brain's going to say, no, I don't want to do that. I'm not feeling good. I don't want to talk. I don't want to move my body. I don't want to do this. And it's like, stop letting that brain and that mind control you because it doesn't know what's best for you. Your past version of yourself who set these things up knew what was best for you because by going to these things, it's going to keep you going forward. It's like, this is where like the non-toxic level of consistency matters. Like, I'm really starting to see consistency in a new way because in the past, I thought consistency was void of any feeling. I thought it was rigidity. I thought it was show up, don't give yourself any ounce of compassion, and just keep moving forward and don't feel anything. You're starting to feel like you're having a panic attack, just keep going. And I'm seeing now it's like consistency is having that internal experience. It's allowing yourself to feel, it's having compassion, but it's continuing to do the things you said you were going to do anyway. And I feel like when you have that healthy relationship to consistency of your understanding of why you're doing it, understanding that your value is not going to come from it, but understanding that what makes you feel good is actually doing that thing despite what your thoughts are telling you. Because even if you're not enjoying it going into it, when you're starting the first 15, 20, 30 minutes, the first entry point of that yoga class or of writing or of podcasting, it's the transition period of moving out of your thoughts. So all things aside, if you just can stay consistent with anything, you're going to see, one, results and progress, but two, you're going to see more consistency in your ability to consistently show up to things, because you see that just because you don't want to do something, it doesn't mean that you actually don't want to do something. It means that you really need to do it.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. It's your mind will keep you in the place you're at. If you listen to your thoughts, it's like the classic example of it's a Saturday, you're not feeling great, and your best friend calls and is like, hey, want to go to dinner? And maybe, I don't know if I love this example because I'm not saying you should always do something when you don't want to do it, but it's just a point of like, you go to the dinner, it's your best friend, you're having a nice time, you guys aren't like going partying, whatever. You're doing like something that like is aligned with your state, like you're just catching up and you feel so much better. And then you come home and you forgot about what you were feeling. And I want to really draw the difference here. The difference isn't that you're going to avoid what you're feeling. It's that you've accepted, hey, I feel sad right now, but I can still do other stuff. And that's where us clinging to the sadness, clinging to the emotion, clinging to the feeling state, creating the story, oh, I'm sad, so I can't do that. I can't go meet up with my friend. I can't go for the walk. And look, there's times where maybe that's not what you want to do. But I think it's a very delicate balance of life. And maybe this is how people end up getting depressed, is you don't push yourself in the way of, like you're saying, pushing yourself doesn't have to be this toxic, aggressive way, but it means you don't always know what's best for you. Your thoughts definitely do not know what's best for you. So maybe you surrender. Maybe you just flow with life. And if something comes up, you do it. Maybe you just keep pushing past your limitations, and then you realize that, yeah, you're going through a lot right now, but does that have to define you? Does it have to be your personality? And does it have to be your whole life? And I'm a sad person who life is doomed and it's dark. And it's the classic example of maybe that black circle is like a centimeter. It's so small. And you have the option for the black circle to say that maybe that's what it just is. And it only is small because relative to it, you're letting the other colors come in. It's like that grief circle I've seen in the past where like you'll always have the pain. It'll always be there. But it's how much are you letting yourself feel the other stuff? How much are you letting yourself be sad, but also be open to love? Also be open to joy, to humor, to laughing, to making a joke about what's going on. Like I've made joke about my trauma. I've made jokes about things happening. And it's remembering that we don't just heal from crying in our bed. That is one part of it, sure. And that's what I've been going through the past few days. But we reach a point where we realize that it's a spectrum. Healing's a spectrum. Life is this spectrum of we're constantly teeter-tottering between feeling, but being in the moment and allowing ourselves to move forward. And we're always moving forward in the sense that we're always going to the next moment. So it's just like, be careful about getting caught up in the story, because the story and the emotion are different.
So you want to hear something funny? When we were entering,
yeah, I do.
Okay, so when we were starting the podcast, I was thinking to myself, oh, like I'm feeling so open right now. I don't want to be having a conversation with Sophie, who's clearly talking about her experience, and I don't want to be taking on that emotion. I don't want to be doing this. I just want to be able to be writing and doing my own thing and being separate, because if I'm podcasting, it means that I'm giving too much to what I could be giving to writing, and yada, 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 yada. And it's interesting how your brain, your mind, is the ultimate con man. The ultimate con artist that is going to trick you time in and time in and time in again. Like it's going to keep tricking you. And that was a sneaky wolf in sheep's clothing. Like that is literally what our brain is. We think it has our best interests at heart. We think that it is trying to solve something for us, because it is. But that thing that it's trying to solve can also come back around and backhand us and keep us suffering. It can keep us stuck. It can keep us not actually finding a solution. It can bring things into reality to where we think we are actually doing something that's better for ourselves, but we're actually creating something that is worse for ourselves.
Well, think of the whole placebo effect. Think of, we forget how powerful our mind is, and that's always what we have to remember. There's reality, and then there's our thoughts. There's our unlimited potential to keep evolving and to keep changing, and then there's our thoughts that are saying, oh, poor me, this all happened to me. And it reminds me kind of like me being in high school and wearing my hoodie and listening to emo music, and it's like, you keep taking on that role of the only way to be hurt in the world is to be closed. The only way to be hurt in the world is to be a victim and to be protected and to never open up. And that's why people get really bitter and really angry, because they don't realize that you can still feel love. And just because you're opening up doesn't mean that you're saying what you experienced isn't real. Doesn't mean you're denying yourself from that experience. It's recognizing that that both can exist at the same time. So it's just constantly remembering, like, your thoughts are going to lie to you time after time after time after again. And as soon as you're caught up in a narrative, I think a good point of reference is, as soon as you're really sure about something, as soon as you're feeling really, really sure that, oh, I don't feel good right now, so I'm not going to do that. I don't think we ever can be sure. And as soon as we start clinging to that certainty, we start believing it, that's when the danger happens, because we're creating the story again. So, wow, that's a realization. It's like letting go of the preferences, or my life should be otherwise, my life shouldn't be this way, because I realize in my own stuff, like happening, like stuff that's happened to my parents and my family, like so much of the pain, or the perpetuated pain beyond the immediate situation of it happening, was resisting the fact, because I envisioned a different family. I envisioned a different life. I envisioned my future looking different. I envisioned all these things that didn't end up being true. And that's where a lot of the pain comes from. It's the difference between expectation and reality. And that's why we should always be cautious in having any expectations, because expectations lead to disappointment. And it could keep us from preventing and enjoying life, because we're so boggled down in the story of this shouldn't be the case.
Well, that again is the importance of showing up when we don't want to show up, and to flesh out what that means more to keep moving forward. It's to keep showing up. If you're going to keep moving forward, you also got to show up and meet where your head is over your feet. You have to be there. Like, that's what it means to be resilient. It's to keep showing up with your head over your feet, despite your brain saying, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. But it's also having the feeling state of saying, okay, this is how I'm feeling, but I'm still bringing this to wherever I'm at. And the importance of having that feeling state with you and not ridding of it in the name of trying to be productive is that it will come back to bite you. Like you said, if you're not ever open, that's why we do become resentful and bitter, is because we aren't ever feeling. So it's not a matter of don't feel, that's what will get you further in life. It's a matter of feel and keep going forward in life, because that's really what is going to get you somewhere, because you're learning from it. And also, when you think about just human beings, it's important that in human beings, in the sake of our world, it's important to show up feeling in all roles of life, because that allows you to have empathy. When you see someone else who maybe doesn't know this lesson yet, you can share that with them, or you can just have empathy, because we are humans. And I think it's interesting how this idea of the split happened, at least in my experience, or at least in your experience with working, where we didn't bring our emotional states into the corporate America. And corporate America absolutely needs to have feelings brought into it. Like, I think
Wait,
there
I
are a
just
lot.
want to I just want to back up for a second because
Yeah.
maybe we could flesh this out. So it's like we're bringing your feelings to work, but that doesn't mean you're gonna be crying at work. That doesn't mean like how do we explain the you're gonna stay open, but of course maybe it's not safe sometimes to show those really dark feelings or intense feelings around certain people. So there's a spectrum, and I don't think we're trying to say if you're going through really intense trauma or you're healing stuff, like you should be showing up and airing that. But maybe it's more so just a fact of not closing. It's a very nuanced thing I think we're trying to communicate of like, could you flesh that out a little more?
Yeah, I just mean showing up and not like disassociating. It's like bringing your full self to work, even if you're not showing anyone that, but you're not tucking it away so that you can't see it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I guess ultimately the staying open is we're staying open for ourselves. We're staying open and not because we're staying open so that, your boss knows what's going on in your life. It's not about showing anyone that you have the privacy and the autonomy to whatever, whatever you're going through like in therapy or whatever to work with what you want to show up and how you want to. But I think we're talking more in a sense of just the state of yourself, staying open with yourself. I think when we think about staying open, we have the capacity for love. And when we think about staying closed, we're angry. So, yeah, I agree. And I think it's about recognizing like that switch of I'm going to move forward. But to me, that would have meant I'm going to move forward. I'm going to be angry. I'm going to move forward. I'm going to be resentful. I'm going to move forward and I'm going to all of a sudden be being so hard on myself. And I'm like I used to work out and be like, come on, let's fucking go. Like, let's go. Like being so intense with myself. So it's about redefining to the listener, like, what does it mean to move forward in a way that you are giving yourself compassion? What does it mean to move forward in a way that you are staying open and for yourself in a safe, healthy way, whatever that means to you? Because ultimately, I think we can have these patterns of I'm going to push through and do it. So it's about recognizing that there's a way to move forward that doesn't entail getting so mad and angry at yourself. All you're doing is just continuing into the next moment.
Yeah, I think I'm just reflecting on like my past experiences of how I would close and I would never allow myself to be seen. And it's all in the name of for yourself. It's all for you. It's all just having compassion for yourself, but being able to move forward with everything that's inside of you and not closing it off and sentencing it to maximum security prison in a far distant corner of your brain.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And that's all you can really do, right? Either we're open or we're closed. And that is what allows us, even though when we're going through tough times, to keep moving forward. And I guess that's a good place to type the conversation is just, we started off talking about how life is hard and life is synonymous with suffering. And that is the reality. But we live in a dual world where we can only have suffering if we have joy. These experiences exist relative to each other. They help to inform the other. So it's remembering that we always have the ability to keep moving forward, no matter what's going on. And quite frankly, it's the only option. So remember that, give yourself the compassion as needed, give yourself the love as needed. Ultimately, it's up to you. It's your journey. And we're just sharing our experiences with working through this, working through the reality of this human experience that we all experience and hoping to share some sort of insight so that you feel less alone, so that whoever's listening to this realizes that you're not alone in your experience and that we're right there with you. So,
and all in the name of enjoying our lives day to day and experiencing moments and really feeling them to the fullest, because again, like we were allocated this time and we've arrived and we're sad, but we've arrived and we're sad, and we're arrived and we're happy, and we're arrived and we're feeling. And I think that's the exciting place to be. And I think that's the message I want to leave this episode with, because that is an important message. It's a message that reminds you you can always shift your reality. You can always shift your perspective.
And that healing is not linear. Like, it reminds me of those stand-up comedians who do comedy to talk about like PTSD and trauma. Like, we can heal in so many ways, and don't think just because you're not sitting there crying and journaling doesn't mean that you're not healing by being open with loved ones or being open with friends or going to the yoga class or doing all these things or watching a movie alone or with your partner. Like, don't place so many limitations on yourself. Allow yourself to be open, allow yourself to move forward. So yeah, we hope this was an insightful episode. We thank you for being with us. We thank you for joining. And until then, we'll talk to you guys on Thursday.